Welcome to the Blended Life Show, Oblamu, where we talk life, community, and relationships. And I am your host, Olive Monica Najjuma. Now, you're doing a great thing watching us, and we are coming to you from Studio 84. Those are our partners that have made this production possible. So if you're interested in audiovisual services, in podcasting, to mention but a few, check out Studio 84 here at Luthuri Avenue, plot 84B, and have a conversation with them and see if you can start your podcasting journey, but also be able to do everything else you want to do with audiovisual services. And with that being said, we have had conversations regarding domestic violence. We have had many stories in the newspapers, on TV, on radio, but in most cases they're just statistics and a report here and there regarding domestic violence. But today, I get to have a conversation with a lady that has overcome or triumphed over domestic violence. She's someone probably you know because she's in the same industry as I am, and I'll let her introduce herself. But before I let her do that, make sure you subscribe and also share this conversation with your friends and family. You never know, it might impact a young lady out there, a woman out there, or even a man. So that being said, hi, how are you?
Hi, Olive. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be here.
It's amazing for me to have you here. I've been looking forward to actually having you share your story, not only with me, but with many other people. And before we get into it, just introduce yourself to my viewers so that they know who we are talking to.
Well, hi, viewers. My name is Sandra Cope, and I'm a radio journalist with NRG Radio. I'm also a social justice journalist. I am a mom and TikToker.
Yes, you are.
And a feminist.
A feminist.
And follower of Christ, of course.
Okay, now I like that you did touch on being a feminist, and this will come up in our conversation at some point because many people today are actually vilifying being a feminist and where feminism came from. But now that I have you here, you'll help us understand whether being a feminist is an evil thing or whether we should all be feminists.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now going back into the gist of our conversation today. At what point did you realize that you were being abused?
You know, most of domestic violence victims don't actually know that they are being abused. So most of the times it's with hindsight, especially when it's not physical.
Yes.
Of course, physical abuse is right there, stuck in your face. You can know I'm being abused. I mean, I'm being beaten and stuff like that. And that's how it started for me. The first encounter I had with domestic violence was physical. And this is when I was much younger, like 20 years ago, with my baby daddy. And yes, we used to disagree on little things. And I would end up bedridden for like 2 weeks. Either I'll have a burst lip or a black eye or a sprained like elbow, something. He was very, very violent.
Hey, that seems to have been really deep.
It was, and I was just 18 years old.
18?
Yes.
And
17, 18 years old. And that was very traumatic.
I can imagine.
It was very traumatic for me because that was the first real relationship I had. And we had a child out of that relationship, but even the way we parted ways was so violent. It was, he like pushed me out of his car and kicked me. You know, I ended up like with my right breast was burst, so I was bleeding. And he just grabbed my head and banged it on his bonnet of the car.
Oh my
and at
goodness.
this point, neighbors came out. This was like at night, and neighbors came out and like, you have to stop this. This is a young girl. You took her from her family, but you beat her all the time. And that was how we parted ways, actually. I got my son, and I left, and I never looked back.
Hey, a burst breast, burst
Yes.
lips.
Yes.
Did you have any broken bones?
Fortunately, no, I didn't.
Thank God.
I didn't have any broken bones, but that experience was very traumatic for me. But to fast forward to other relationships that I had, and if I look back now, like I said, other forms of domestic violence that are emotional abuse. It could be emotional abuse. It could be sexual abuse, but in this context, emotional abuse, which I think is so prevalent.
Yes.
And it is so silent because it's so hard to pinpoint.
Exactly. In most cases, by the way, when you dial back, you could find that pretty much all of us have found ourselves in a position where we have been being emotionally abused. I'll give you an example. The silent treatment.
Yes, it is.
And most people don't see it as abuse.
I think it's because, most of the things that happen to us are deeply enrooted in our childhood or our past experiences. Now, if you look at that past experience of mine, and I was just 17, 18 years old. I was quite
Pretty young, yes.
So you can imagine the trauma that I carried forward to my other relationships, but also to track a little bit back from that. I grew up as an orphan. I lost my mom at 15. I lost my dad at 19. So I was an orphan. Well, this puts me in the mind space I was at, because who you are determines who you seek in relationships.
That's right.
So looking back, this guy was like 8 years older than me.
And you were just 18, 17, 18.
17, 18. And looking at it now, from where I'm standing, it looks like I was a little girl just wanting to be loved.
You were looking for your father.
Yes.
Because your father died at 50, when you were 15.
19.
When
My
you were
mom
19.
when I was 15.
So you had, this is where we talk about attachment and attachment styles. Why do we attach to the people we attach to?
Yes. I had for a very long time an anxious attachment style because I had abandonment issues. I always felt like we never finished with my parents, and I just carried that forward to my relationships. And also that yearning to be loved makes you put up with a lot of nonsense just because you want to be loved. And then you go into people pleasing.
So now let's dial back to the first relationship, because the physical one, but I would like for us to also later on get into the emotional abuse. But for the physical abuse itself, you see, in most cases when women say, I have been abused, or even men, any person that is in an abusive relationship, but most especially women, they're asked, what did you do? What did you do to trigger that kind of reaction from this person? So could you tell us what would spark off the beatings, the punches?
I'm a very outspoken person.
Since when you are younger?
Oh, yes. I was that child.
Okay.
And my parents, especially my father believed in speaking up, speaking your mind, and we were allowed to ask questions. The family setting, the African family setting, yes, I would say, is the parents have the authority. You do what you're supposed to do,
yes,
without asking questions.
Why? How dare you ask the question?
Exactly.
Who do you think you are? Yes.
In our household, it was different. I guess because I come from a biracial descent, and my dad was British and Japanese, and
so he came from a different culture and raised.
Yes. So his parenting style was, yes, of course, there were times where it was like, you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
You're a parent. I mean, this one, we don't have to deliberate on it. But sometimes if he proposed something and you're like, but dad, why would we do that really? Can't we do this? And then you like debate it. It's like, you know what? You're right. Okay, let's meet each other halfway.
Okay.
So we grew up with that kind of setting that no, you can question authority.
Yes.
You can. It's very okay. It's like at school, you know how they tell us, eat and don't talk. So me, I would always talk. And they'd come and tell me, you, Cope, why are you talking when eating?
You know,
I'm
it
like,
was-
because we're like savages. Why are we eating without talking? My father says we should have conversation at the dining
Actually, at the dining table is where families are supposed to bond, but we're raised not to say a word.
Yes.
Different cultures, I guess. But let's get back to...
Yes. Now to that, he would say something like, don't go out. And it was from a place of insecurity, from where I'm standing now. Like, don't go out. I don't want you to go out. I'm like, why shouldn't I go out? My father used to let me go out. I want to go out.
And you're 17.
Yes. I'm like, why shouldn't I go out? Like, no, because I don't want you to. I'm like, well, that's not a good enough reason for me. So that was like one of the things. And if I would speak to someone I knew, if it was a guy, or I would get a beating. Definitely.
So let's say you're at the supermarket and you run into someone you know and you probably say hi, just a few minutes, maybe 2. Would that warrant a beating when you got back home?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, it would. It's like, why are you all over the place? You don't need to be hugging, guys and what? How do you know that guy? But you were talking to him too long. You didn't introduce me,
And if you introduced him, would the situation be different
He would be rude.
to the other person?
He was just rude.
Okay. So now there is the you speaking up, and then there is, how about the other times? Because I don't think you were always being, confrontational.
Other times he would just, either he had been drinking, and then you just, like sometimes you get a beating and you don't know why you actually got a beating. You're like, what did I do? You just get violent or maybe shove you or I don't know.
Do you think he was probably to a degree just enjoying it?
I think so. I think he got a kick out of it because even after I left, I just had like stories of different like relationships he got into, and it was the same thing. So I think he got a kick out of it because he was the common denominator in all those relationships. We were different women, but
And he was still
he was
the
still doing the
violent
same
partner.
thing. Yes.
So it can't be that, Sandra was too much, she was speaking too much or doing this too much. How long did this last, the physical abuse?
It lasted all through our relationship.
All through?
Yes.
So normally when you hear conversations regarding still abuse, many people, the first question is, why didn't you leave? What kept you in so long? So I would like to ask you, what made you feel trapped enough? What made you feel trapped that you stayed long and you didn't even seek for help in the years when this abuse occurred?
The physical abuse.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I felt lost because he took me from my family and he took me somewhere else where he got me a little place. Remember, I'm an orphan, so it's not like my parents are there. I was a broken young girl. And shortly after, I became pregnant with my first child.
Yes.
So you can imagine I had dropped out of school. I was pregnant. I was in this abusive relationship. And he also had money. Now, him having money made my family not stand up to him. Because they were benefiting, the particular game players then. Because they saw me with black eyes, they never really gave him an ultimatum. They decided to look the other way.
Because they were enjoying the money.
Exactly.
That's
So whenever he would really give me a beating, he would come to this place with shopping and this and that. Oh, it was just a little misunderstanding. And people would just sweep it under the rug.
So were there times when you would actually leave and maybe he comes to fetch you and they would let him take you back, despite him probably not promising to be better, not being held accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. He used to tell me that it will be over when he says it's over. I remember this. I like those words rang in my head for even years after. I was absolutely afraid of him.
Wow.
Because I remember once I did leave and he found me somewhere and he just grabbed me from my friends and I did get a beating that night. Why had I left? He was looking for me and he couldn't find me, and how could I leave? And yeah.
My goodness. I'm so sorry you went through this. And so now let's circle back to the point where you left. How long did it take you to feel that I am now safe? Because I believe for a while you were looking, behind your shoulder to see, is he lurking in the shadows? Or what was going on in Sandra's mind at the time?
Well, I was terrified of him and I left Uganda because I couldn't stay here with my child. I was afraid. So I left. And
With the child?
yes, with my son. And that's how I got peace. But of course, the trauma lasted with me for years. For years. It really took years for me to, to at least, to even be able to talk about it.
Is this the first time you're openly talking about it?
Actually, I would say yes, because I've never even had this conversation with my son, and he's 22 now.
Oh my. So he's going to watch it with the rest of the world, or you're going to have a conversation with him before this airs?
I'm going to have a conversation with him before this airs, but he kind of put two and two together.
About the violence or about the separation? Because the father is not in the picture right now, right?
No, he's not. Now, about him being like a volatile person, because he got to talk to him when he was 18 years old on the phone. They've never met.
Oh, wow. They've never met because he has not made the initiative to meet him, or you don't want them to meet?
No, he just never made the initiative to meet him, because I remember when my son was 9 years old and he really wanted to know his father, because he grew up in Kenya.
Yes.
And he knew, of course, his father is in Uganda. I never really told him anything about the dad. And we were coming to Uganda to visit. And I sent word to his father that, your son wants to see you. He just wants to see you. Like, we don't want anything from you and stuff like that. But he did send word back to me that he's not interested. And my son was about 9 years old then. But I didn't tell this to my son.
Of course. How do you tell a young
It would
boy
have broken
that?
him.
Yes.
So at 18, a few months before he turns 18, when we have moved here and everything, the father calls me up after 18 years.
After it.
So it's like, I want to meet him now. I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, it's between him and his dad. Like, everybody has a right, if they want to know their biological parent.
That's right.
Regardless of what happened, they have a right to know. Especially, he was turning 18, so he's a young adult, and I'm like, he's ready to. So they talk a little bit on the phone and stuff, and like a few weeks later, my son tells me that, you know what, I don't think I want to meet him. Like, where has he been?
And remember, now he's 18.
Yes, so
he's an adult. You can't make him do what he doesn't want to do.
So it was entirely his decision. It's like, no, there's something amiss with him. I was like, oh, okay, it's your decision. So that was that.
Wow. So you've gone to Kenya. You have left with your son, but you're still scared. You're still living with this trauma. At what point did you feel that I am now healed? Or and also what factors led to that healing?
Oh, wow. I think it was when I moved to Nairobi. because I first moved to Mombasa and I was working there. And then when I moved to Nairobi, I was in my 20s. I was very young. And I started like getting into my own, like carving my identity and getting to know what I like, what my triggers are, and without having anyone in my ear. Because I'm the youngest sibling and all my siblings were here. So in Nairobi, I was in Nairobi by myself at 23 years old.
New city,
New
different
city,
culture.
got a job, got my own place. And I just started, for once in my life, I started listening to myself and what I wanted to do. And being in this environment, nobody really knew like my past.
So it was a fresh start.
It was
for
a fresh
you.
start, because I remember then in Kampala, people used to see me and be like, "Oh, that's the chick. She's like, the guy beats her like a drum and stuff like that." And it had like become my identity, this abused chick.
And you're the kind of chick that is easy to spot. Like someone says you and they're, oh, you mean that one?
Yes. So I started slowly healing from that. But of course the trauma remained, and I can see that in my patterns coming to relationships, regarding relationships. I can see that because the guys who I sought out were like, they had an avoidant attachment style.
And you were anxiously
And I was
attached.
anxious attachment style.
Yeah, that's how it works. You're anxiously attached. You seek out for avoidant partners. And someone may be wondering, oh, what are these two talking about? But there is something called attachment styles where depending on the trauma or how you were raised, you will attach as according to the your childhood or your inner child. So let's say you were abandoned by a caretaker, a guardian. Maybe you didn't have a good relationship with your father left. It could actually even be death. The thing is,
For me, it was death.
exactly, for you it was death.
Yes.
Others, it is abandonment. The thing is, you're going to seek out partners so that they can give you something that you didn't get or something that you missed from your caretaker. For women, it's most especially their fathers, though some have the mother wound. So that also creates another attachment style.
Yes.
So at what point, I'm still on the healing, because in the beginning you did say I was anxiously attached. Are you now, what is securely attached?
Yes, I would say so. But to get here was, how can I put it, a very tumultuous series of relationships. And my very recent one was very emotionally abusive. And with that, I had to do a lot of reflection and introspection. I had to do that. I had to look in the past and see, what is it about me that makes me tolerate this level of abuse? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Emotional abuse. Because, sometimes you don't really realize the degree to which you've been abused or disrespected until you're telling it to someone else.
And people are like, what?
And people are like, what?
And what did you do? Because they want to know if
Yes.
you reacted in the way they think you should have reacted.
Yes. And that's when it hits you. And you're like, okay. But I guess my turning point for this to start my healing journey was, I would say, back in 2020, because I was at my rope's end, and I tried to commit suicide.
No.
Yes, I felt I was not giving in enough.
Oh my
Like I'm not
goodness.
enough, because I was completely stripped of my self-worth. Completely. It was depleted. It's like if this person can't see me, then I shouldn't be here, because why am I here?
So you feel I have given this person
My all.
everything.
And it's not enough.
I have tried. You know, like how they say, maybe do this, maybe do this. Because in most relationships, they blame the woman.
Yes.
What aren't you doing? Aren't you taking care of him well? Aren't you pleasing enough when it comes to bedroom matters? Are you doing your best? Because men love sex. Are you cooking well? Because the route to a man's heart is through
So the
his stomach. You've given him children. So you felt you had done everything.
Absolutely everything. I did. I felt so. And I just had also to, after that, I felt okay. You know, they say the first person in court always seems right until the other person speaks.
That's right.
And you're like, okay, wait a minute. So I really had to sit and see what part I play in my pain. I'm like, what part am I playing in this pain? And that is when I began my sobriety journey. Because my drinking really escalated. I used to drink before. I actually started drinking. On my sobriety journey, they tell you, you have to find the reason why you want to quit. But I sat and I thought, why did I start? You know
You
what I
had
mean?
to go back.
I had to go back. And I started drinking when I lost my mother to cope. That's when I started drinking. I was never really bothered about alcohol. So it was like an escape, numbing.
At 15,
At 15.
that's when you started drinking.
Yes.
So you were numbing the pain of losing your mom. And then at 19, you lose your dad.
Yes.
And at 19, you're losing your dad, but you're already in this tumultuous relationship.
Exactly.
So that relationship is already bad. You're drinking to deal with the
Yes,
pain
to
of the
deal with
relationship.
pain.
And then your father dies and you continue drinking. And now you're a single mom at some point. Now you're drinking even more to find comfort. You're in a new city, new country.
Yes. I remember I was working at Wilson Airport then. I was a dispatch officer for the flights. And my son and my aunt came from Mombasa. And you know, like the pilots used to bring me booze. I used to, because we were all friends at the ramp.
Yes.
So I tell them, oh, where are you going? I'm going to Addis because I would see on the manifest.
Yes.
Okay, bring me this, bring me coffee, bring me this.
So you were getting alcohol for free.
Duty free. I had a bar at home with like and I used to drink whiskey then, single malt. No punch.
Neat.
Neat, with just 2 ice cubes. I'd sit at my balcony facing Wilson Airport after work, and I would just sit there and drink because I lived by myself. And this was a way for me to cope until my aunt came. And I remember I was at work. It was an emergency, so they called me on Saturday. And she opened the kitchen sink, down.
Below the kitchen sink, where you're supposed to keep
Looking
your...
for the dustbin. Oh my gosh. There was like whiskey bottles,
Empty.
vertical and horizontal.
Wait, were they empty
They were
or...
all empty.
Sandra?
They were empty.
I'm laughing, but it's not funny.
You know,
you know
and
how
then-
you laugh at a bad
Yes.
situation after you've gotten through it.
Yes.
Because
Oh, she comes like, Sandra, we need to talk. Like, you have a problem and this and this and that. So anyways, I had to track back. Like, why did I start drinking? And I had my own trauma before I even came into this relationship.
the most recent.
Yes. And when you've been through a traumatic experience, like your childhood and this and this and that, people can take advantage of that because they see that you have this thing in you, like you want love. So you can put up with so much because they're like, okay, so what are they going to do? They're really desperate for this love that they are going to stay there.
So they start breadcrumbing you with the love.
Yes.
And when you're getting to realize that they're actually giving you crumbs, they now come in and give you a slice.
Yes.
And
love bombing,
they
the abuse. It's like a dance.
Uh-huh.
So one time you're thinking, okay, they're not really nice to me. maybe I shouldn't be here. Then they love bomb you, like, oh, but I think they're really nice and this, and that's how it's a vicious
And when you say
cycle.
love bombing, what exactly? By the way, we've even gone ahead. I would like for us to walk us through some of the ways someone can know that they're being emotionally abused. Because physical is easy. There is a punch here, a kick there, a slap
Yes.
there, a pinch, whatever. It's easy to identify that I'm being abused. And maybe before we actually move on to the emotional, did you at some point ever feel like it was your fault that
Oh,
he was physically
absolutely.
abusing you?
Oh, for the physical
Yes.
abuse? Yes, I was young, so at some point I thought maybe I shouldn't do this because then I'll get punished. Because I was young. I was barely 20.
It was literally punishment.
Yes.
It was.
So I just used to be so careful, like what to do or what not to do. It was like I had a principal and not a partner.
And then did you ever feel embarrassed to talk about it to people close to you?
Yes, I did. First of all, I couldn't process it myself. I didn't know why it was happening to me. And like I said, the closest people to me at the time didn't say anything. The adults
They
didn't
were
say
emboldening him instead.
they didn't say anything. It's only my late aunt who gave it to him and be like, I'm going to have you arrested or this and this and that. But she didn't live here. She lived in the UK. And my sister, my elder sister, she stood up to him and she's like, don't do it. And she's the one who actually came and got me that fateful night when I left. She's like, just grab the baby, let's bounce. We're never coming back. And that was that. And she looked after me and she looked after my son. And yes, but those were the only two people. The rest did absolutely nothing.
Okay. So now let's get to the emotional abuse. Let's say I'm in a relationship. How do I know, especially for you that has gone through it and even overcome it, how do I know that when a partner does this and this and that, they're actually emotionally abusing me? And what's worse? Because yes, physical, you might lose a limb or something, but I've had some people saying emotional abuse can actually be worse than physical. So now, from a person that has gone through both, what would you say is worse, or they're equally as bad?
They're equally as bad because they're so traumatic, I'd say, but they're equally as bad. But my encounter with emotional abuse is somebody who absolutely disregards your feelings. You tell them how you feel. It's like they do something to upset you, and you're trying to tell them how that made you feel, and they completely disregard it. You're overreacting. You're overreacting. That shouldn't be an issue. Or they acknowledge it, and then they want you to heal immediately.
As in, get over it.
Yeah.
We talked
That was
about
the
that.
past. We talked about that. Let's get over it. They do not take to account how you are really feeling. Or they could give you a totally different version of what happened, which is a lie. Now, this is it's very common in narcissists.
Yes.
If you're being emotionally abused in a relationships, 9 chances out of 10, you are dealing with a narcissist. And these are people who are so self-absorbed and they have a huge sense of ego.
Self-importance.
Yes.
Everything is
Inflated
about
sense of ego. Everything is about them and it serves them. They are pathological liars.
Oh, yes, they are.
It is, you have to go through it to understand it. Somebody who has never been with a narcissist can never understand. If you tell them what you have gone through, they will think you are lying.
A friend of mine was leaving her marriage, And like 4 months before she left, she would talk to me about different things that were happening in her marriage. And there were small things. Many people say, ekyo tekikujja mu bufumbo. You can't leave a marriage over that. Yes. And one time when we were talking, I was like, you know what? If a person does not hear the ABCDs of your relationship and grievances, they would never understand why you want to leave your marriage. And you're not going to go broadcasting your story to
Absolutely
everyone.
not. And you see, the nature of this abuse, like I said, emotional abuse is very hard to explain to somebody else. The only person who can understand it is a psychologist. A psychologist can understand it. And I did see a psychologist, and she did tell me that this was after I tried to commit suicide. And I was told that I was crazy. And so I did go and see this lady, and she sat there and she listened to me for 2 hours. She asked me questions. She told me, tell me about yourself, tell me about your relationship. And at the end of it, she told me, you're not crazy at all. You have been emotionally abused for years by your partner.
Oh my
This is the problem. This is the problem. And that for me, because I felt like I was going crazy, that for me to get it from a certified psychologist and to tell me, honey, this is what's up. I was like, oh, okay. Because you feel like you're crazy. Because you're being gaslit when you bring up something. They're like, no, it didn't happen like that. And she did tell me, you know what you need to do? You need to keep a journal. Write the time, write the date, even if it's a very small thing, write it down and how you felt. She told me that. And she did tell me that victims of emotional abuse often have memory loss to particular events or how they played out. Now, she told me this happens because of years of being gaslit.
Make
You say,
you think
this happens like, it happened like this. They tell you, no, it happened like. So you start second guessing your sense of reality. So you start forgetting. And she told me when you are in an abusive relationship with a narcissist, you are in survival mode. So your brain releases a lot of cortisol, and that is the
hormone.
the hormone
That-
that manages stress.
okay.
So you have a lot of it in your brain chemistry, and that's why you're always in survival mode. Now, one thing the brain does, she told me, is when something is so painful, your brain blocks it out.
There is
Because
a
you have to
term for
survive.
that, actually.
And that is why you have memory loss, because your brain blocks it out. It is so painful for you, and you have to survive, especially if you're in a situation where you have no job and you can't leave and you have children. The brain does this to you because it's its defense mechanism.
It's trying to protect you.
It's trying to protect you.
So when you reach a point where you're now thinking suicide, even the brain is overwhelmed.
Exactly, because it has given up.
Okay.
Being suicidal is, I mean, it's the end of
It's
when
the
they say
end of-
mental health. Like this, none exist. It's like the brain has shut down because it can't deal anymore.
So let's look at that just briefly. At the point, because you have children, and at the point where you're considering, this is very recent, at the point where you're considering suicide, are you even in the minutest way thinking about their life in the event that you've gone?
Not at all. Not at all. When you're in that state, you're mentally sick. And this is why I really sympathize with people who have attempted suicide and unfortunately those who actually passed away. People don't quite get it when you're in that state of mind.
Because in most cases, people are like, you're selfish. How could you
selfish.
not think about the children?
You're not thinking. You're in this emotional paralyzation. You're paralyzed by pain emotionally, mentally.
You just want the pain to go away.
You want the pain to go away. And most people think that, oh, it could be the alcohol. Alcohol is always never the problem. is always a symptom of another problem. And that is my sobriety journey. It's like quitting drinking is not about putting the bottle down. It's about thinking, why do I drink?
Okay.
I need to sort out that. So, yeah, and I think people should be more compassionate to, to people who are going through something like that. And you know what people say? People can really sit back and watch abuse and do nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Oh,
And this can
it
be your
happens
close
a
friends
lot.
and people you hang out with every day, and they see it and they will say absolutely nothing about it.
So now, Sandra, we are now roses and sunshine. You have overcome, and I commend you for that. I admire you so much for the journey you've walked, but you didn't lose yourself. You found a way to get up, get back. So when it comes to where you are now, you found your voice that you had lost at some point. How are you helping other women? Or how important is it for a woman to have a voice when it comes to relationships that have abuse in them? And how are you helping other women that could be going through the same?
I would say the first thing is by speaking about it. And what I have noticed is most people do not want you to speak about your abuse. They want to tell you, things happen, you should move on, and this. Yes, things happen, and you should definitely move on. But from where I'm standing is, in life, one way or the other, we are victims to something. And that is inevitable because it's life and things happen.
Yes.
But picking victimhood is a whole different thing. So this is just a case of life happening to you and life happening for you. And I think from a Christian perspective, because I looked at my life before when I was a single mom and how I got through that and how I raised my son. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm in this new place now that I went through this abuse. I'm like, I should be able to pick the purpose from the pain. What is the purpose of this? Because there's always a purpose in there. It's just like how I would speak to teenage mothers and encourage them because of what I went through.
Yes.
And they even reach out to me. They DM me on Instagram. People DM because of the show I do as well on Energy Radio, the Vent. People actually reach out to me when they lose parents, they are struggling with alcohol, they are teenage mothers. They reach out to me because they hear me speak about it. So you can see the power of speaking about it. And this is what I have begun to do now when it comes to abuse in relationships. I think we should speak out. And many ladies have been reaching out to me. They're like, Sandra, what did you do? How did you get out of it? Like, I'm in it, but I don't even know where to start.
I don't know where to start. So how important, because for me, what I'm taking away from this is that they are looking for a support system. They're looking for someone to believe them, because that's also very important for people to believe you before you can start the journey. Because if you come to me and say, Olive, this is what I'm going through, and I don't believe you, then you are lost. So how important is it for someone to have a strong support system, the same that you found in your sister and in your aunt, who eventually stood up to your ex and said, you know what, this cannot happen again?
What I would say is you have to be very bold in a sense that even if your circle doesn't believe you, the people around you might not believe you completely. But guess what? You have your people that will believe you. You remember we were in uni together, and you remember audience analysis and media research? You will always have your audience.
There is always an audience.
Yes.
If it's not that
so
close.
those people just around you there who don't believe you and tell you, no, don't speak up, you need to move on. No, you need to speak up, and you need to speak up unapologetically, because there are women out here who understand what you're going through. You don't need to convince them.
That's right.
They are there, they understand.
That's right. I remember when I was a teenage mom, because I was also a teenage mother, I was lost. I remember I went to a shop. We had landlines back in the day, remember, around 2007. So I was calling my baby daddy on my cell phone and he was not picking. So I went to the shop to try and call him on a landline.
Oh my goodness, I remember.
Yes. So I call and another woman picks. I didn't even know there was another woman in the picture until I told him I was pregnant. So anyway, I'm lost. I am traumatized. I sit at this shop and my life literally is fleeting before me. I'm in senior 6, I'm pregnant, the man is acting funny. And I remember there was a gentleman seated next to me on the bench. He said, "You look so sad. Are you okay?" I broke down. I talked to this gentleman, said everything. But after, I don't even remember his face because we never shared numbers. But after I talked to this stranger, I felt better. So I hear you. There is always an audience.
There is an audience, and you can see that with Daniela team. I love what she's doing. She is changing, what would I say, the tapestry of this African culture that really demeans women.
That marital secrets should never be aired out.
That you should stay there in the sake. And they say, people these days love to say, marriages these days don't last like our parents.
Do you know?
The mental
Yes.
space those women are in.
Also, do you know that they stayed because they didn't have options?
They did not.
And speaking of options and empowerment, I want us to end there. I would like for you to tell us, because we've had your story, young, pregnant, single mother, now journalist. At what point did you get the educational empowerment that you're now using to help other women? When did you go back to school? Because at 19 and you're having a baby, you're definitely out of school.
Yes.
So when did you go back to school? At what age did you graduate? I'm interested in that part.
I love this part of my story. And I like to say that you should be able to tell your story. If you're out there and you're listening, you should be able to tell your story to people, because that is the most powerful thing about you.
And if you want to tell your story, you can reach out to us at the Blended Life Show so that we can help you tell that story, because we are all about Oblamo life, community and relationships. Go ahead.
So yes, at 19, I dropped out of school, and it was actually before that, because I was pregnant at 18. So dropped out of school at 17. I remember I did my senior 4 because my mom passed away when I was in my senior 3. I just gone to senior 3. And I flunked my senior 4 because I just couldn't cope. And fast forward, I had to leave school and I had to raise my son. So I did all sorts of jobs. I was a waitress. I was a sales girl at like an optician shop. And these are things that, life, God has a way that he can teach you and humble you.
Yes.
Because once I was somewhere and somebody, the frames and the lens had gotten out and this. So I'm like, oh, what lens is, it looks photochromic, this and that. And I fixed it like, how did you know that? I'm like, I used to be an optician sales girl back in my,
when people see you all pretty, looking nice and classy, they can't even imagine some of the things you've gone through or the experiences that you have had.
So yes, like I did all these jobs to be able to raise my first child and put food on the table. But yes, fast forward, I went back to senior 4 actually.
At what age?
I was 31 years old.
Oh my God.
Yes.
31 years.
31 years old. So I went back and I found this adult school. It's in Wandegea. I found it online. I went, I sat for my senior 4. And that same year, passed. And then I did my 5 and 6 right there. And I remember, 2016, that's when I sat my senior 6.
Yes.
And I left and I went to Cavendish University. And I got to do journalism, and I always wanted to do it.
And at Cavendish, I remember the first time I saw you, you were pregnant.
Yes.
When we were about to finish,
Yes.
we were pregnant. Because we were doing the same course, but I was in a different program. I was a weekend student. So when I came in one time during the week, I'm like, who is this cute pregnant girl? So you eventually, at what age, graduated?
Wow, I graduated, I think I was 30, 38.
Wow. Imagine that.
Yes, so I love to tell young people that approach me, because sometimes you find them and they feel they're a bit lost, like, oh, Sandra, and they do come to like, Sandra, what should I do? My parents want me to do this. Or other people have approached me like, Sandra, I'm pregnant, I don't know what I'm going to do, my life is over. I'm like, it's not, because everybody has a life that God has carved out for them.
I agree.
You don't have to follow this timeline, other people's timelines.
That's right.
Sometimes you have to live the life that you have prepared so that you can live the one that is waiting for you.
And life really, we think that life should be a straight line. Ideally, they give birth to you, you go to school, you finish school, go to university, graduate, get a job, get a husband, live happily ever after. And even the media that has been given to us over the years has been around the same. Of they ride in the sun in the sunset together.
Yes.
But that's not how real life happens. And I love that through everything you found your voice, you found yourself, and here you are. I love healed. And healed looks amazing on you.
Well, I wouldn't really say healed, because, like, I feel healing is an endless process. You can't say, now I am fully healed on this, because sometimes you get triggers. Healing is
Yes.
not a linear journey. But I have learned also not to be stuck in
The pain.
recovery,
Okay.
but also simultaneously be in a state of discovery and recovery.
Oh, nice.
You're
You're like balancing it.
Yeah, balancing
if I'm
it
not
out.
recovering, I'm discovering.
Yes, or I'm doing both at the same
Oh,
time.
all right.
Because life must go on.
Indeed.
It must
Life
go
has
on.
to continue.
You can't make victimhood your identity. What I would love to do is use my experiences to help others who are undergoing what I went through. Because now I have coping mechanisms that I know, and I have very strong women around me who have been very good support systems to me, and I would like to be that support system
To other women.
to other women. But most of society, especially the people they misconstrue that when you talk about your trauma and your abuse, that okay, but just move on, don't talk about it anymore, just but I'm like, do you know me? I am a social justice journalist. That is my purpose. I feel that's my calling.
Also, if you're feeling comfortable enough to talk about
it.
because everything we've learned over the years, it's because someone was bold enough to talk about them. If everyone went through something and they kept quiet, I know there must have been an age where women went through things and you could never talk about them. And then it took some women breaking through the glass ceiling, like you are doing right now, to say, you know what, you don't have to suffer in silence. It's important.
Absolutely. And I feel one very important component of healing that most people don't consider, and I feel this slows their healing process, is also to look at your abuser, in this case, and not with anger. Of course, you have also to go through the anger of handling what happened to you, but also to really look at them as a person and look deeper to see what kind of trauma do they have as well that makes them act like this.
Indeed.
put a face to it. And because that is when you will come to forgiveness, because forgiveness is a very important part of healing.
Oh, yes. Because when you do not forgive, you are going to still remain there.
You're going
And
to
you
be
know, the
bitter.
sad part about not forgiving, lack of forgiveness, is that, excuse me. The sad part about lack of forgiveness is that you keep in pain, hoping that the other person feels it too. And they don't. And they don't have to have become better people. You just have to work on yourself and forgive them so that you can now heal and move on. But we can't go any further. This has been quite a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing your story with us. I am touched. I have learned a thing or two. And as I've always told you, I am very proud of you for the woman that you've become despite everything that you've gone through.
Thank you. It's been very good to be here and to talk about this, because I feel many people, both women and men, can really benefit from this. And it's always about healing and, like we said, forgiveness and just being better individuals.
Exactly. Well, this is the Blended Live Show. Thank you so much for being a part of us. Now, if you have been watching and you have not yet subscribed, please hit the subscription button, but also you can hit the notification bell so that you can know whenever we have a new episode that is out. Also, don't forget to share this episode with your friends and family, your neighbors, girlfriends, sisters, uncles, cousin, so that they can learn a thing or two about abuse. And until next time, bye bye.